One count. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, looking over every college football season and the national championship that was claimed by one or more teams. So, of course, in the playoff era, 2014 through 18, we have a national champion. There's only one because we've got a playoff or a selection process in which we've got four teams that play toward a championship. During the BCS era, 1998 through 2013, we had two teams selected to play in the championship game by computers and by human vote, 2/3 human vote, 1/3 computer analysis. And then, of course, pre-1997, then we had all sorts of chaos with different conferences designated to go to different bowl games that didn't necessarily determine the best matchups. And then we had a vote by the Associated Press and the United Press International. The coaches poll then emerged with the USA Today and then ESPN taking that over. So we're going season by season, analyzing the national champion and whether they truly earned it. We have arrived at 2015, so check out the videos from 2016, 17, and 18. Here in 2015, it's pretty clear-cut, but on a side note, it's a really interesting narrative involving Alabama and Ohio State, the two teams I believe to be the best teams in 2015. Clemson made the national championship game. They gave Alabama a good game. They had a lead early in the fourth quarter. Then they lost 45-40, a game in which they scored a touchdown with 13 seconds left to make it 45-40. So Bama had a nice cushion in the last 4 to 5 minutes of that game en route to a national championship in which they finished 14-1. And unlike 2017, they were the SEC champions, defeating, let's see, it must have been Missouri, yes, in that championship game in Atlanta. Okay, consider how slim some of these national championship seasons are from being derailed. Consider the plight of Alabama. Consider the plight of Ohio State. The Buckeyes, of course, were the defending national champion. They came into the season as consensus number one. They owned every number one vote in the polls. Of course, once the College Football Playoff Selection Committee got a hold of the rankings, the polls don't matter. And Ohio State was still number one through week 10 when they were 10-1. They lost to Michigan State on the final play of the game in Columbus. Michigan State went on to win the Big Ten championship and go to the playoff. Ohio State lost that game 17-14 on a last-second field goal. That was Ohio State's one loss. Alabama basically had the same resume. Alabama went 11-1 during the regular season. They lost one game. That was to Ole Miss. So they both lost to really good teams. Alabama lost to Ole Miss by a wider margin, and they lost earlier in the season. So consider the zaniness, the craziness that had to happen to usher Alabama into the playoff and keep Ohio State out of the playoff. On the Alabama side, after losing to Ole Miss, Ole Miss did not lose any other SEC games. They did lose to Memphis, ironically. And they had a one-loss record in the SEC into November. So at this point of the season, Ole Miss was headed to Atlanta to finish off a 7-1 SEC season. Of course, they would hold the tiebreaker over Bama and get to the SEC championship game out of the West. Against Arkansas, a back-and-forth game that eclipsed 50 points per team. Crazy game. Went into overtime. Ole Miss scored in overtime to take the lead. Arkansas had its last chance on a 4th and roughly 15 play. You can check me on this. It's roughly 4th and 15. They throw the ball to current Los Angeles Charger tight end Hunter Henry. He catches the ball. He's about to step out of bounds, but of course, his football savvy tells him the game would be over if I step out of bounds. It was about a 10-yard completion. Hunter Henry really can't do much of anything. There's a tackler wrapped around him, pushing him out of bounds, so he just throws the ball over his head. That was the smartest thing he could have done. The ball lands behind the line of scrimmage in a scrum of players. Alex Collins, Arkansas running back, emerges from the pile with the ball and heads to the end zone, and Ole Miss defenders chasing him down to no avail. Arkansas wins on that kind of play to defeat Ole Miss 52-51 in overtime. Well, that gave the Rebels a second loss in the SEC. Bama marched on to 7-1 in the SEC, and that allowed the path for Alabama to get to Atlanta and the SEC championship game and claim the SEC title. On the flip side for Ohio State, they lost to the very last team, the wrong team in the Big Ten. They should have lost to Rutgers or Maryland or Indiana, because that would have meant that they beat Michigan State and they would have won the tiebreaker and gone to the Big Ten championship game, even though that would have been a very embarrassing loss, of course. But they lost to Michigan State. Well, rewind about 3 to 4 weeks before the Ohio State loss to Michigan State in the Big House against the Wolverines. Michigan's winning. They're in punt formation. There are just a few precious seconds left on the clock. And the Michigan punter simply needs to not even punt the football, just fall on the ball, just down it right there, and the game's over. The Michigan punter fumbles the snap, bad snap, or he fumbles the ball. I don't remember yet. And instead of just holding on to the ball, he feels the need to toss it up in the air. For what reason, I don't know. I still don't know to this day why the Michigan punter would just throw the ball up in the air. The game was over. Collapse on the football, protect the football, the game's over. He whirls around, throws the ball up in the air almost perfectly to a Michigan State special teams player that I knew the name at the time. I don't remember his name, and I didn't look it up. Give it a look. He actually broke his leg on the play and missed the rest of the season, diving into the end zone with a pile of tacklers. Had any of the Michigan players been able to track him down about 2.5 yards earlier, then Michigan would have stopped Michigan State at the 1. The game would have been over. But Michigan State scores the game-winning touchdown, and that play knocked Ohio State out of the Big Ten championship game. Otherwise, Michigan State 7-1, Ohio State 7-1, because Michigan State lost to a under 500 Nebraska team. And, of course, they won the tiebreaker against Ohio State, and the Spartans went on to defeat Iowa, an undefeated Hawkeye team, in the Big Ten championship game and go to the college football playoff. That was the difference between Ohio State making it or not and Alabama making it or not. Just an interesting side note, because the Alabama Crimson Tide certainly earned this national championship in 2015. Again, they went 14-1 with one loss to Ole Miss. They played a vaunted SEC schedule. I am not remembering off the top of my head who they played in their early season non-conference game. The season before it was West Virginia. 2015, I believe it was Wisconsin. May have to check me on that. I didn't look that up. I'm just babbling at this point. So basically what happened here is that Alabama goes on and wins the national championship. They completely annihilated Michigan State in the Sugar Bowl, which was the national semifinal. To Michigan State's defense, it was a 7-0 game with about 5 minutes left in the second quarter. They played Bama toe-to-toe, a scoreless first quarter, and Connor Cook threw an interception in the end zone that would have tied the game or got them within 10-7 at half, and then Bama just steamrolled in the second half. Clemson outclassed Oklahoma in the other national semifinal, 40-21. After a close first half, they blew them out in the second half. And so then you had Alabama earning the national championship against Clemson. It's interesting to note the criteria of the playoff committee. They emphasized in 2014 the conference championship and the 13th data point. And they have, a year later, actually selected an Ohio State team in 2016 that was not as good as the 2015 team as a non-conference champion, and that started that trend of 2 years with Ohio State and then Alabama. But here in 2015, had the term best team, we're selecting the best teams. Michigan State earned that Big Ten championship. They beat Ohio State. They should have been in the playoff. But if you're just talking about best teams, I don't think anybody that watches college football would deny that Ohio State may have had the best team in the country. They certainly had one of the 4 best teams in the country. They went on after that loss to Michigan State to pound Michigan and Notre Dame, 2 top 10 teams in the Big House and in the Fiesta Bowl. Our take on 2015, it's an Alabama win. It's undisputed. Again, if we apply the best team criteria of the committee that they applied here in 2017 and 2018, then maybe you say Ohio State makes it instead of Michigan State. But the Spartans, despite maybe not having the talent to stand up to Alabama, earned their way to a national playoff. And again, oh so close for Alabama, sneaking through to Atlanta and eventually the college football playoff for Ohio State. They were laughing, most Buckeye fans, I would imagine, watching in the Big House Michigan blow a game against Michigan State. But had they known just a few weeks later, that play would most likely keep them out of the college football playoff. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Keep our channel running, humming, and growing so we can bring you the best debate, analysis, and discussion in college football. Right here, we'll be back with 2014, the inaugural college football playoff, right here at the voice of college football.